So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book On the Track Xtra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs, and welcome to another episode of On the Track Xtra. Just in case you don't know, this little fellow here, who is propping up my computer keyboard, is Archibald Archimedes the Archimandrite, otherwise known as Archie, and this young lady here is Lilith Tinkerbell. And I love these two little creatures dearly. I have other animals around the place, but don't tell them, but Lilith and Archie are my two favourites. Probably because they're the ones who attach themselves to me more often, and are therefore more often seen on screen during On the Track and On the Track Extra. What's the difference, you ask? Well, On the Track is a show we do every Saturday afternoon. It's a mélange of hard science, weird shit, and sorry alchemy. Did I say sorry alchemy? That was a slip of the tongue. And On the Track Extra, like what you are watching now, is about half the length of that and comes out every Wednesday evening at about 6:30. So, shall we get on with it? And what are we going to talk about? Well, once again, and it was only a couple of weeks ago that I told you that I had stories sent to me for the show from my friend Daisy in Germany. Well, I've got another one for you because Daisy sent me this story about a poor, unfortunate toad. This is a cane toad, the largest species of toad in the world, and it was caught in northern Australia about a week ago. What makes it special? Well, this is probably the largest one ever to have been recorded, weighing 2.7 kilos. But why have we got cane toads as a subject, no matter how big they are, in this week's On the Track Extra? That's because the story of the cane toad is a particularly interesting one and also counts as a cautionary tale to us all about what happens when one messes about with the balance of nature. Cane toads are a remarkably ancient species. Fossils from Colombia from the end of the Miocene period, which ended 5.3 million years ago, so it's going to be older than that, are indistinguishable from the bones of modern cane toads. And it seems from all the available evidence that they behaved in much the same way as cane toads do today, living on open, flat, lowland areas. The cane toad is naturally a native of Central and South America, but it has been introduced to quite a few different places around the globe. Why? Well, the clue's in the name. This is a cane beetle, and it is, as the name implies, a pest of sugarcane plantations. The adults eat the leaves of sugarcane, and worst of all, the grubs burrow and eat the roots of sugarcane, killing the adult plants or at the very least stunting them severely. Somebody had the bright idea about 100 years ago to introduce cane toads to Puerto Rico, where the cane beetles were causing no end of harm to the sugar cane plantations. So they introduced the cane toad, and believe it or not, it was a magnificent success. This is probably the worst thing it could have been, because it was such a success on Puerto Rico that they introduced it to the Philippines, various islands in Oceania, and in 1930, worst of all, to Australia. And in Australia, these creatures have caused absolute havoc in two ways, because as you saw earlier in the show, they can reach an enormous size and they can eat small mammals and reptiles and birds, as well as the invertebrates that they more usually feed upon. But what's worse is they're extremely poisonous. Now, one of the interesting bits of social science about this is that about 30 years ago there was a fad for people keeping pet cane toads and then licking them and having hallucinogenic trips from the bufotoxin, which is secreted from the warts on the back of the toad. Bufotoxin may get you off your tits if you are a well-meaning hippie somewhere in the California valleys, but if you are a small mammal, well, small to medium-sized mammal in Australia, it's going to kill you. And a lot of people believe that this is what happened to the yarri, or the Queensland tiger cat. The cane toad has also been blamed for the disappearance of other unknown creatures, such as the surviving thylacoleos, which have been hypothesized from the region. However, it's not really fair to blame one animal for the disappearance of another animal that we don't even know if it exists or not. However, the cane toad is certainly responsible for precipitous declines in the populations of the northern Quoll and declines in goanna and snake populations. For example, the monitor lizard Varanus panoptes, the yellow-spotted monitor, dropped by up to 90% when their habitat was invaded by cane toads. The preliminary risk assessment of cane toads in Kakadu National Park stated that the predation of the cane toad by native wildlife is the greatest risk to biodiversity. Other factors such as competition with native wildlife for resources and the predation of the cane toad on native wildlife were considered to be much lower risk factors, but ones which required further study. In the Northern Territory, goanna deaths resulting from poisoning after predation on cane toad has been linked to a rise in the number of undamaged saltwater crocodile eggs. Cane toads were present within a few days of the crocodiles hatching in April 2007. However, some things are adapting. Dahl's aquatic frog, for example, is able to eat the tadpoles and live young of the toad without being affected by the poison. And in 2009, the native meat ant was found to be immune to the toad's poison and can successfully prey upon young cane toads, whereas native frogs and toads have natural reflexes to avoid the meat ants. The cane toads do not tend to try and escape them, rather standing still while attacked, waiting for the toxin to kill the attacker. You will probably have noticed that while I've been filming, I've had various cats and dogs jumping on and off my lap. But I've had somebody else here with me while I'm filming. I've had, on the other end of an iPad, my old friend Ve Macrinnon. Hello, Ve!
Hello, John.
How are you, Ve?
Hello, John.
Are you going to say hello to the boys and girls on the show, Ve?
Hello to the boys and girls on the show, V.
Yes, that shows what a wonderfully adaptable and natural actor and natural voice presenter dear Ve Macrinnon is. But Ve Macrinnon told me, shut up now, you've had your 5 minutes of fame, stop laughing. Ve Macrinnon, while we were filming the earlier bit about the Quolls, told me that there had been a project about 10 years ago during which quolls, or baby quolls, were taught not to kill cane toads. This sounded absolutely remarkable to me. If it hadn't been from Ve, and I know Ve comes up with very strange stories, but I always trust what he said. He's a very, very believable chap. So I went in search of this, and it turned up an article for a group called Resilient Landscapes, who are an Australian national environmental science programme. And on the 1st of August 2014, they described how native mammals across northern Australia face hordes of threats, including feral cats, fires and other introduced pests like foxes and cane toads. But how an ecologist called Jonathan Webb, all people called Jonathan are going to be jolly nice fellows, is investigating whether quolls can be trained to avoid eating cane toads. Quolls readily attack toads but are poisoned by the bufotoxin and die after coming into contact with large ones. But since 2009, Dr. Webb has been trialling whether adult quolls can be trained to avoid catching cane toads and whether this improves their survival rate. The project started when the team trained 50 captive-reared northern quolls by feeding small dead toads laced with a chemical that made them sick. These toad-smart quolls later refused to attack live cane toads. The quolls were then released back into sustainable and suitable environments near the East Alligator Ranger Station. 20 cage traps were placed along 6 trap lines, that's 120 in total, in crevices, under overhangs and near logs where quolls live. When a quoll was caught, it was weighed, given a health check, and identified according to its microchip number with a scanner. The animal was then released back into the wild with minimal stress. And the fantastic thing is that the research team found that some toad-smart quolls survived and had babies. Genetic analysis showed that 2 of these offspring also went on to have babies. Toad-trained quolls may be able to increase northern quoll populations in toad-infected areas, but only if other threats such as frequent fire and predation by animals like feral cats and dogs are addressed. And that's about it for this episode. I'm going to be back on Saturday. What is going to be in Saturday's show? Well, I'm sincerely hoping that it is going to have not only the last part of the interview with Steve Andrews, but also a chat with our very own Katie Elizabeth. So, I'll be back on Saturday. Thank you very much to everybody who helped with this episode, but particularly dear Daisy, who sent me down a completely complex rabbit hole which had all sorts of twists and turns that I really wasn't expecting, and Ve Macrinnon, who made me laugh when the dictating and editing was getting too much for me. So thank you to you two, and are you listening, Macrinnon? Because, like I said, I'll be back on Saturday, and I very much hope that you will be there so I can be seeing you.